Hi there, I'm Dean Heskin. You are tuned into our podcast entitled The Secret War on Cash. I have with me today my co-host, Chris Agelastos. Chris, good morning. How are you?
Good. Doing well. Surviving another frigid Arizona winter.
No kidding. Arizona, people tuning in hear Arizona and frigid, they probably are laughing, but we're down below freezing temperatures, in the high 20s,
Yeah.
early 30s. So that's pretty cold, especially in the desert. That desert cold is a pretty bone-chilling
Yeah.
cold for those of you who have not experienced it.
And we're not used
Well,
to it, so we don't know how to deal with it well.
no,
We're babies.
no, we don't. Well, let's get right into it. We knew this topic was coming. We have our new administration that is already hard at work, and BRICS is, in fact, I don't think we've talked about this before. I'm not sure I remember during the alliance known as BRICS started really gaining momentum a lot over the last, what would you say, maybe a year and a half or so.
Yeah, probably a year and a half, I'd say.
And I'm not sure I remember really once in all the various articles and podcasts that we've covered this topic that the Biden administration, I don't know if I ever remember them saying anything about BRICS really. I don't think I remember them, there's talks as it relates to the US and the effect the BRICS was going to have on it, but
Yeah.
specifically I don't think Biden ever addressed the issue per se. And as we talked about in one of our earlier podcasts, the Trump administration, even before he took office, was, you know, issuing threats, tariffs, things of that nature.
hmm
So,
Yeah.
excuse me, let's get right into it here. In this first article, let's look at what BRICS, the analysts call the US dollar grossly overvalued. And here's why. And it's interesting because the valuation of the dollar, I wouldn't really think of it to be overvalued, especially grossly overvalued, given some of the things that we've been talking about as it relates to the dollar and it losing traction in the global marketplace. But
hmm
here they're saying it is grossly overvalued. Here's why. Tell us a little bit more, Chris, about the why it is so grossly overvalued.
Well, essentially what they're saying here, and I do understand it, and I mean I kind of agree. The reason they're saying it's so overvalued is because the world is so currently reliant on the dollar, meaning the dollar has a lot of power and influence. And if it didn't have that influence or that same level of influence, then its value would drop significantly. So, I mean, it is valued fairly because of that influence, but influence is something that you can lose pretty quickly, right? The tide can turn, as Brick certainly hopes that it does. And some of the interesting anecdotes they put in this article, which I didn't know, is that the state of Mississippi, which is known as the poorest state in our country, is richer per capita than either the UK or Japan, and they even point out that some gas station managers can earn more than European doctors, and so that does kind of show you how valuable the dollar really is, and how good we do have it compared to others here in this country. But like you pointed out, we didn't really hear the Biden administration talk much about BRICS, and I sort of think maybe that was because they didn't want to give them any credibility. Kind of like they're not even important enough to talk about. But Donald Trump has been very vocal about it, and with him coming into office now, he's not probably going to sit there and just let this go by the wayside. He is addressing it, and I think he's going to kind of be on the forefront of pressuring BRICS nations to continue to use the dollar and maybe even distance themselves from BRICS themselves. So we'll see. I mean, it's definitely a tall order. At the very least, I think he could slow down the progress. I don't know that he'll be able to really have a major effect, but if he does anything positive, I guess we're at least moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, this will be a very interesting topic to cover over the course. not only just his presidency, but I mean, literally
Hmm.
the rate or the speed by which these things are happening this year alone, I can't even imagine the type of things that we're going to see because it's not, something where the BRICS nations are backing down at all. They actually kind of have doubled down in a way. Even India, we covered in that earlier podcast, who
Yeah.
seemed like they were kind of softening in their involvement because they needed to help strengthen their own currency. They kind of doubled down as well. So, man,
Hmm.
it's going to be very interesting to see what kind of direction this takes. And it's all this de-dollarization. That's, basically what BRICS is reflective of. And let's look at this next article here. It specifically gets into, as the title says, 10 US sectors to be affected if de-dollarization advances. And as I looked at this, these are the 10 sectors that they say are going to be affected. I mean, the global financial system, that's a big one. Banking and
Yeah.
finance, that's an area that we already have, a fair amount of strain or stress in. Energy and commodity markets. An interesting thing about the especially when you get into commodities and whatnot, the amount of resources that these BRIC nations control is huge. International
Right.
trade and investment, the capital markets, consumer goods and retail, production and consumption, technology and fintech, government and policy, travel and tourism. And the reason I wanted to read all these, Chris, I'm like, as I looked at this list, I'm not sure they did they leave anything out because this seems like this is pretty much everything is going to be affected. And then, again,
Yeah.
you've got this runaway locomotive, and you're talking about what's going to be affected if this continues, and it looks like it's going to continue. It's going to affect everything, is it not?
Yeah, that's what when I looked through this as well, I thought maybe they should just list the one or two sectors that it isn't going to affect, because
Right.
that's really what I'm wondering now. I mean, this pretty much covers everything. Certainly enough that it's a major issue for us. And yeah, I like that Trump has been sort of trying to take the bull by the horns here and not ignore all of this like the Biden administration did. But some of the talk that he's throwing out there. I mean, talking about 100% tariffs on nations that are actively trying to ditch the dollar. Um, Not to say that he won't do that, especially probably if they're smaller nations. I sort of feel like he's going to want to make an example out of some countries just to show that he is willing to kind of follow through on some of these threats. But it's a catch-22, I feel like, because it could very well backfire. Because one of the reasons that these countries are looking to distance themselves from the dollar is because we have used sanctions to apply pressure to other nations to kind of do our bidding and do what we want them to do. So it sort of shows shows that we're willing to use this force, and it also shows that's why they kind of need to rip the band-aid off and maybe ditch the dollar to some extent. So we've already lost over the last 20-ish years a good chunk of power in the dollar. I mean, we used to be about 80% of the world's reserves in their central banks, and we're under 60% now. And that's a pretty big reduction. Now, it wasn't all overnight, right? But it's been a consistent change. And so, where are we going to be in another 10 years, another 20 years? What are our kids and our grandkids going to have to deal with in this country if we completely lose our influence with the dollar? So I don't know. It's going to
Right.
be, like you said, it's going to be interesting. I don't just expect to have chaos and fire raining from the skies tomorrow. But this is definitely something that we need to keep an eye on, and certainly protect yourself as much as you can, by diversifying your assets.
Sure. Well, and that's an excellent point you bring up, Chris, how, the dollar reserves have been steadily on the decline. And this is not something that just happened in the course of the Biden administration. It's been happening for years and years and years now. And that trend already being underway, Trump going in and I'm sure having some very idealistic aims or goals that he has for his presidency. This is not something that he created. It's not something that was just created. It's already started. And then you put that in conjunction with what's happening with BRICS. It's just, I think there's too much fight to be had here. And so the question remains, or that remains to be seen, is what remains to be seen, excuse me, is how are we going to handle this to make sure that whatever repercussion, if you want to call it that, whatever fallout there is, it takes the lightest toll or a lesser degree of severity, because I just
Right.
don't think it's avoidable at this point. So well,
Yeah.
thank you for that. And for those of you tuning in, if you'd like more information on this, visit us on our website. You'll see the website as well as our phone number in the description of the podcast here. And if you're not subscribed, please do so, as we'd love to talk to you more in the future. Chris, thanks for all the information. And we will look forward to you talking to us more about BRICS and some of the developments there as we move on into our new year and this new administration. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Yep. Take care.